All right. And we're live, guys. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and dive right in. This is, of course, if you've tuned in past couple episodes, this is my black book, and it has all my prophetic visions and dreams in here. This is where it all started. Um, uh, all my writing nowadays is done in like Google Keep and my phone and in different formats, but and also audio recordings. But this is where it all started. This is the one that has a lot of the date and timestamps. I still date and timestamp now, but this was just this one has a lot of like the date and time. The ones nowadays, I just have like the date. I don't have the time necessarily. I should start doing that again. But this has date and time. And this one also has a lot of things about the future and inventions and stuff. I don't have recently. I don't have too many of the inventions and future stuff here and there, but this one had a lot more. All right, so let's look at the first one here. This one is back in here. I'm going to show you guys. I always want to show you whatever I talk about because I'm not just making it up now. This is what the date and time that was at. This one doesn't have a time actually. It has a date though. See that there in the corner? It's 12/21/2008. Okay. So yeah, December 21st, 2008. I love the winter months because usually I get a lot of good stuff during the winter. Okay, so there's a little sketch too. You see there. So if I talk about it, you can see it's like this mountainside, like carved into like the mountainside. So if you can imagine like a mountain, and then like carved like this. So this is like the mountains like this, but carved like that inside, like the mountain here, like that. So the mountain then carved on the inside like that was like a town. It's crazy. Um, so I was standing at the top of a grassy hill, looking down upon a small, densely compact town or port city. It felt for some reason that it was definitely not taking place in modern times, but somewhere far in the future. Like I could already just had the vibe that this is like in some really distant time. And it had Asian or Japanese style houses and buildings. And there was buildings, some houses above the grass on the mountain, but a lot of the city was taking place in this sort of like carved out piece of the mountain by on the on sea level at sea level. The town was in sort of a U shape that had some houses, but mainly shops and markets in the inset carved portion of the U. The residential area was mainly above the U. Yeah, okay. So there was like some houses above, but mainly like a lot of the city, right? The shops and so forth were in the U by the water. Um, and I stood above from the front yard of a house on the very top of the hill, peering down in awe of its beauty. The style of the houses and buildings were traditional Asian Japanese style architecture, maybe inspired, or maybe the location was in the Far East. I really didn't know. I then decided to walk down towards the small port town. Upon arrival, I realized that the ocean might actually be a big lake since the water is so calm. It wasn't like an ocean, it was like this really calm water. I ventured down to the heart of the town and looked at all of the various shops and landscape architecture close to the port. Close to the port of the town is an iron, possibly bronze statue of a man resting an anchor on his right shoulder. And written on the statue, it says, Monk Brothers, year 13477, 13,477. And that's the what it sort of looked like. I'm not a good artist, but that's what it sort of looked like. I look closely at the statue and see that it's a bald sailor that has a very happy appearance to his face. I look to see if anything has been inscribed and notice that it says Monk Brothers year 13477. My suspicions were confirmed and it was in fact far in the future. After that, I walked into the nearest house. Nobody was home. In fact, the whole village was void of any animal or human life, completely abandoned. Why? The houses and buildings don't look very run down at all. They seem to be abandoned in a hurry, right? It's like there was no trace of foul play. It was like it was just people just up and left, and it wasn't like it was sitting there for a long time. Like everything was there, like rotting. It was just like just recently, somewhat recent in the recent past, people just left in a hurry. There was no trace of foul play. It's as if something or someone forced them to leave suddenly. I took a look around in the house and didn't notice anything unusual at all. Everything was very neat and tidy. I walked back outside to look again at the water. After a few minutes, I started to see an object the size of a semi truck moving in the water very slowly, about 100 meters away. I couldn't really make out what it was exactly, but it's as if it had some invisible properties to it, reflecting the water around it, giving a kind of mirage appearance. The ship docked nearby, and a family of three stepped out. At first, from a distance, they seemed a little blurry, like a mirage. As they walked closer, the image got clearer. The family of It was a family of three: a father, mother, and a daughter. And they greeted me and asked me to step inside the house I was just in a few minutes ago. They said that they want to take me they said that they want to talk with me about something important. For some reason, I started getting the impression that they are not there to help me. They're not here to help me, but capture me like everyone else in this town. I told them that I needed them to answer a few questions to, so that I could stall for time to figure out how to get out of there. I asked them if I could eat something before we get started, and they complied. They then said that the food would start to decay. They said that the food would start its decaying timer as soon as I opened a container or box. Like there was like food in the house, and they said, "Sure, you can," but they said that it'll start decaying, so try to eat it right away. That's interesting. It's like food had like an immediate expiry date. Like it wasn't like food would expire how it is like nowadays, like over the course of a certain set date according to the package. But like it was like as soon as you open it, it like, started to die. I don't know why. So you had to eat it right away. Um, uh, I didn't bother to ask why, and said that I need to go to the bathroom. All right, trying to figure, maybe that's not good. Maybe I can go to the bathroom. I need to get out of the house. I managed to convince them that I wanted to take a piss outside because I loved the view, which was partially true. It was beautiful, but I wanted to get out, right? So walking along the side of the beach, I saw what looked like a water bridge that led to another town a mile or so away. I I walked across and wondered why they weren't chasing after me. I was like, yeah. So they didn't bother to go outside and look for me, see if I was gone. It's like they trusted me. I wasn't really sure. Maybe they weren't even worried. Maybe the bridge acted as some safe haven. I wasn't sure because they weren't. Maybe it was like once I got onto the bridge, they knew they couldn't get to me. It was like they didn't think I would actually go on the bridge. Maybe they thought he doesn't know about the bridge. It's fine. He could just go outside for a second. But I guess once I was on the bridge, it's like they knew they can't get me now. It was like the bridge was like a safe haven, had a force field, or something was like blocking them from getting to me. It was like built just for this purpose, like as an escape route. Um, um, I reached the new town, and it looked very lively and somehow more futuristic, um, with a slight Asian feel still to it. When I started my walk over the bridge, it was close to sunset, and when I arrived, it was dark. So it took a little while, right? Like I said, a mile or so. But it took a little walk, maybe 20-minute walk. I'm not sure. Um, um, and when I arrived, it was dark. The city streets had Japanese style lanterns lit. A young girl, maybe about 23 or 24 years old, ran up to greet me. I had a much better feeling about this place already. So this place felt much better. She said that she had to go to work and that she would try to explain everything in time. She told me to come with her. She grabbed my hand, and uh, uh, we were suddenly transported into an empty room in an office building. The funny thing is that I didn't feel myself move, right? I didn't move or anything. And it was just the scenery that changed. It was like, you know, when she grabbed my hand and I was like transported, but like, it wasn't like I went somewhere. It was like I wasn't in place, but the, the world around me like morphed. Like it was like I was, it's like that changed. I didn't move. I could move freely like this, just kind of like that. But like everything else changed. It was like, it's interesting because I always thought that like a transporting, I would feel like I'm going somewhere else, but it was like it was seamless. It was like the world changed, I didn't change. It's like different frequencies, like it just like tuned in to a different frequency, and I was just there at a different frequency. Um, and so just the scenery changed. The office building looked very familiar to something more from my time, which more from this current stream of understanding of reality. Although I still wasn't sure where I was, or where I was from or how I got there in the first place. The young lady told me not to speak of what I saw and to follow her lead. Basically, we're in a place where you shouldn't share that stuff, a certain realm where you shouldn't be sharing that information, and just kind of do what she says. Um, she told me she told me as we were walking through a row of noisy cubicles with people chatting with each other, and they were on the phone, that she is one of many time travelers. I asked her why she comes here, and she replies, I'm trying to fix humanity's mistake, just like everyone else." And I asked her the year now, and she says 1990. She introduces me her boss to her boss at the office building and tells the boss, "Here he is." The boss asks me some computer related question. Maybe I'm here to help fix something like everyone else. Maybe I serve a higher purpose. That's where it ended. Wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if the boss was in on it, if he was a time traveler, if he was just, I wasn't really sure what was going on, but that's where it ended. So yeah, that's the experience of 13477. Okay. Next, so that's one I want to share with the Black Book. Another one, the Black Book. This one is 2/7/2010, 8:30 a.m. See up top there. Okay. February 7th, 2010. This was the first experience with past/parallel lives. I actually never investigated in my life ever, past lives, parallel lives, or even spirituality for that matter. Really, with like divination and all that stuff. Growing up, I never read about that stuff. And it wasn't until past maybe past 2 years, something like that, a year or two, that I've really been reading up about what's going on in the community about so-called ascension and past parallel lives and all that different all the other thoughts out there that are in the world. I was never exposed to that stuff. I never read that stuff. I knew it existed, but never really looked into anything. All of my information about spirituality and connection with the deep base reality, but what's really going on, I did it on my own, through investigating dreams and just writing them all down, and being honest with my own consciousness and asking questions, and being curious and just kind of delving into things. I never, read stuff and decided, oh, that's something I believe in or something that rings true to me. No, I just investigated things on my own. So I had no prior understanding of past parallel lives or anything like that. All right. So now that when I look back now at the previous 15, 20 years of all my writing, it's amazing to see how some things are like, well, that's exactly what they're saying nowadays. Or some things are a little different. Like, so, and I trust my experience more than what some others say. Like maybe they're just sort of, kind of fabricating something, or they're not even aware they're fabricating it, or, maybe they're seeing something else. But, I'm able to see my own truth clear, and also things that are aligning with other ideas out there. Like, oh, that seems to be a common thread between my experience and other people's experiences. So, um, so when I read this now, after recently reading it, looking into past parallel lives, I think, wow, how interesting how this is exactly what they're saying. And I've had no knowledge about that stuff, but was my experience. So this is what it was. First ever experience of a past/parallel life. And it says, the truth behind life's big mysteries. This is 2010, right? February 10th, 2010. The truth behind life's big mysteries. What happens after you die? Well, some religions got close, but still way off. When you die, you are presented with two options. Either choose a new body with no memory of your past life, parallel life, right? Or stay in afterlife form and retain all your memories. As you may realize by now, I chose to keep them. The beginning is a little fuzzy because after a while, you lose the ability to remember any bad memory or experience you had. All you can recall are the good ones. You would think that's a good thing, but no, it's quite the opposite. You lose all perspective and it makes everything fuzzy, and all people have flat characteristics. That's it. That's all it was. But it was like 2010, no previous experience or knowledge about, past parallel lives, anything like that. And this is what came to me. It was like I had this like glimpse of the memory of when I was presented with the options and I could choose what to do. And the experience of what it was like when I chose to, stay, like if you stay in the afterlife, basically, you stay in the other side, heaven-based reality, etc. You're in this state of love, in this pure state of love, right? So you're not thinking anything negative. You're in perfect balance. You're happy. You're perfect vibration, high vibration, right? You're not in this lower vibrational state here in this realm, right? So you're not thinking negatively. Everything's just sort of this flat, positive love vibration, right? And so, yeah, you would lose perspective on certain things, right? Because you lose the understanding of what it's like to be positive and negative, right? So negativity is not there. It's just very flat. So now as I analyze it now in the future, 13 years later, I'm like, wow, that still makes sense today, even with all the knowledge I have now. It's like, yeah, that's exactly right. So it's cool to see that. It's still point on. It's like everything I wrote just makes complete sense, even more sense now. Yeah, okay, so that was that one. So the next one, last one from the book I want to read is not read, I just want to share a little bit, and then I want to give you, this is the full movie. So I have unbelievable experiences, as you probably have already noticed by now. We've only scratched the surface, the tip of the iceberg of what I'm going to be sharing. This channel is going to have hundreds and hundreds of these experiences, as I've written them all down, hundreds of these things. Some are just, fragments, some are full-length things, some evolved into novels, some evolved into screenplays and other short stories. Some were just recordings of what happened. Some are just like a synopsis of a story. There's lots, and some are just experiences. Some are just thoughts. There's a whole different variety of stuff I'm going to share, but this one in particular is the first time I got a full-length, I hate to say the word movie, I guess the best word I can describe it as, a full-length experience where I was an observer watching in detail this entire thing play out between multiple people, right? I didn't feel like I was watching a movie necessarily, but now as I think about it, it's like, yeah, it's kind of like, that's the closest analogy I can get, is like, yeah, like closest metaphor is like, yeah, I was watching a movie, because I was just like watching all these things take place. And so this is, I'm reading a little snippet of this, just a snippet to prove to you, to show to you, this is when it was originally written. And then I wrote it all out in more detail later on, which actually turned into a book that I never actually released, because I wasn't writing this. I don't write this stuff to make money off of this stuff. I write this because it's part of who I am, and why I share it, just because it's part of me. And now it's a way for me to understand myself, and I want to share these experiences as well. There's in hopes that maybe they can see some sort of value in it, or something that can help them find their own path, or think about things, think about reality a little differently, a little perspective on things. And so this was in, I don't have a time, but I have a date, 11/19/2010. It's also 2010. So 2010, right? 11/19/2010 is when it happened. And it says a group of relatives are sitting in a room who barely meet up. They are here because a family member passed away. They end up talking about consciousness. Each presents a different point of view. The younger nephew has read a bunch about consciousness in books and talks to the uncle. The uncle, which is the what does it say here? Talks to the uncle, sort of an anti-hero, I guess is what it says maybe here. And the uncle is an oddball uncle, and he arrives. He's bald with tufts of orangish hair coming out the sides of his head. He's bald on top, and he has the orange hair on the side. He's been gone. This uncle's been gone the longest, and they all wonder what he was up to. They all go to the funeral by a town car. When they open the casket, okay, I'm going to stop right there. So this is like, so all this, as you see, all this stuff is a very big synopsis. I have a bunch of pages here, but this is really, when I woke up, I realized there's so much detail in everything I saw. Like, I saw everything, and I could recall everything at 100%. That's the crazy thing, 100%. When you wake up from dreams, you probably can't recall everything 100%, right? Maybe some dreams you can recall more than others. Very few lucky people can recall every little point, everything in super ultra HD fidelity, and every thought, everything, and recall it. Not just remember, but like recall it 100%. That's very rare. That I've noticed, and I guess I'm one of those. Very, very rare though. I don't have these experiences all the time. I have varying degrees of the spectrum of consciousness, right? Dialogues and Dreams in the Spectrum of Consciousness is my sort of the title I give all this stuff. And this experience in particular was not hazy at all, not fuzzy, 100% ultra HD fidelity, and 100% recall. And the best way that I figured out how I would approach it, is that I would wake up, I would write it all down in a synopsis, high-level summary format. And then at some point I would, extract that and fill it in with all the detail in that summary. So this one and a half, this one simple little paragraph is actually 2 chapters of information, right? Of writing, which is, so like these 2 chapters. So like, it's like this simple little paragraph. And I wrote it down, expanded into like 15 pages of detail, right? So just to give you an idea. So now, with that in mind, I want to share with you a little bit from this paragraph, expanded into what it was like, what I experienced. Okay, I show you this just because I want to show you. I'm not making this stuff. I didn't write this later on. It wasn't something I wrote just from my head, like writing a short story or a novel from my head, from my own imagination. This is something I saw and I wrote it down, right? So when you hear this, I'm going to read this next. When you hear this, this is not me making things up. This is exactly what I saw, and I just wrote it down. Okay, so this is exactly what I saw in 2010, and the book is called 52. It's like 18 chapters or something like that. Never got published. Maybe I'll publish it at some point. I think but I'll definitely share this stuff on my channel. Okay, so 52. This is chapter 2. I just wanted, because I thought it was a good sort of middle chunk of where I just talked about. Okay, so that uncle, his name is Barry. Okay, the bald on top, the orange hair on the sides, his name is Barry, right? Okay, so Barry stood on the street, kicking a pebble down the road. The pebble bounced left, right, and popped straight up before landing and taking off in another direction. He turned toward the sun with his back to the road. He stood and shifted his body as the sun rose behind the trees. He avoided the shadows and remained in the light. He looked back at the ground and kicked another small rock. He took the phone out from his pocket and called for a taxi. As the phone rang, Barry stared into the sun, then blinked and rubbed his eyes. The air was brisk. but Barry stood in his faded t-shirt from a football franchise he had never watched. An operator answered and Barry gave the location. A horn bellowed and Barry turned away. Barry climbed into the back seat and gave the driver directions to the funeral home. The cab driver put the destination in the GPS and took off in the ex-police car. The plush leather seats had seen better days. Barry didn't buckle and sat wide-legged, propping his knee between the driver and passenger seats. "Who died?" the cab driver asked. Barry looked at the cab driver through the rear view mirror. He could only see the driver's eyes and the puffy flesh underneath from a few too many hours without sleep. Barry laughed. "What do you mean?" Barry asked. The driver looked at Barry and continued driving. He stopped at a red light and turned back to Barry. "I didn't mean to presume," the cab driver said and turned back. He waited for the light to change. Just take me there and I'll take care of the rest," Barry said. The cab made its way through the small town littered with bakeries and florists. Funerals needed accompaniments as much as weddings. The driver pulled into the first open spot, about half a block away from the funeral home. "Is here okay?" the driver asked. Barry looked forward. A car parked at a cafe across from the funeral home piqued Barry's interest. Barry stroked his chin and tapped the shoulder of the cab driver. The cab driver glanced back at Barry. "Could you pull around the back? I need to assist with something and my legs. I need you to assist with something and my legs aren't what they used to be," Barry said. "No problem," the cab driver said and pulled behind the funeral home and parked near the loading dock, sandwiched between an old ambulance and a large pickup truck. "Much better," Barry said. The driver punched a few buttons on the dash and rang up the total. "It's been a long time," Barry said. "What was that?" The cab driver turned to Barry. Barry looked at the cab driver and smiled. His lips strained as he stretched his mouth as wide as possible. He opened his eyes even wider and stared in the general direction of the cab driver. He pointed to his head, right, and he pointed to his head with both of his hands. He twitched both of his ears. 52. 52 years, and when I want to, I can be strong with these big ol' ears," Barry exclaimed, never losing his wide smile or blinking his eyes. The cab driver stared back. Barry leaned forward towards the cab driver and put his hands in his pockets. The cab driver exhaled. Barry took his hands out of his pockets and propped them on both the driver's chair and the passenger's chair and slammed his forehead into the cab driver's face. The cab driver shot back into the wheel, blasting the horn and blood gushing from his nose. Barry got out of the cab and calmly walked around the cab. No one else took notice to the scene. Barry climbed into the passenger seat and sat down. He smiled, and the cab driver slowly turned, dazed and bleeding, towards Barry. Barry slammed his head into the cab driver's head again and again. He kept bashing his head until the cab driver went limp. Barry left some money and got out of the cab. The cab sat in the hazy light, and Barry stood for a moment. The shadows from the nearby vehicles diffused any glare. The interior of the cab was clearly visible to the outside world. Barry climbed into the cab and looked at the driver. Tiny bubbles were forming around the man's mouth and nose. The driver was still breathing. Barry took a pillow behind the driver's head and placed it on the driver's face. Barry smothered the man without any resistance. He took off the driver's jacket and covered the dead man's face and bloody exterior. The backside of the funeral home was plain and drab. It could have been a fish or paper warehouse. There weren't any distinguishing marks to suggest anything. Barry strolled up a ramp to a large, heavy steel door with deadbolt locks. Barry knocked lightly on the door and wiped the blood from his eyes. He stood there tapping his foot until he heard a latch opening and a small, thin man in a weathered lab coat opened the door. Barry stared at the man, and the man stared back. "Are you all right?" the man in the lab coat with the label assistant asked. "What do you mean?" Barry replied. The assistant grabbed something out of his pocket. I'm going to call an ambulance. Sit down, please," the assistant pleaded. "No need. I'm here for my brother. I just bumped my head," Barry said. Well, then Let me help you get cleaned up. The assistant turned and walked over to a sink, phone still in hand. Barry followed right behind. That won't be necessary. It'll fix itself right up in no time, Barry said. Here, the assistant handed Barry a wet towel. Where's my brother? Barry asked and dabbed his forehead. The blood continued to flow. Over here, the assistant led Barry to the coffin. You have to keep pressure. Barry stood over the coffin with the wet towel on his forehead. He took his left arm and searched the coffin. You can't open it. It's a closed casket, the assistant said. He put his phone back in his pocket. I need to see my brother. Barry's eyes were red. The assistant looked at his watch. Only for a second. They'll be here any minute to pick him up. The assistant moved Barry to the other side and opened the casket. Barry's brother remained still in a new suit, but the rest of his body was immaculate. Oh, sorry, but the rest of his body wasn't immaculate. Hi, Jim, Barry said. It's time to go. It's time to go, the assistant said, and walked over to close the casket. Barry put his hand on the assistant's chest. I need to be with him longer, Barry said. I'm just doing my job. The assistant moved Barry's hand and shut the case. So am I, Barry said, dropped the towel and wrapped his arm around the assistant's neck from behind. The assistant struggled and hit Barry as hard as he could, but Barry's strength overwhelmed the frail man. Barry dropped the assistant before finishing. The assistant dropped to his knees, gasping for air. Barry scanned the room and ran his hand along the counters and desks, and his hand stopped on a small razor, a box cutter. The assistant's face was red, and he was still gasping for air. The assistant's phone rang. Barry noticed, but didn't look at him. The assistant fumbled through his pocket and grabbed the phone. He tried opening the phone, but dropped it. He searched the floor as he choked on his breath. He grasped the tiny blade in his right hand and walked over to the kneeling assistant. Barry grabbed the man's hair and exposed the man's pale neck. He slit the throat quickly and dropped the assistant to the ground. Barry pushed the body under the desk and covered him in an old blue fleece blanket. Off in the distance, a door shut and muffled voices carried to the room where Barry stood. There was his bloody towel on the ground. He kicked it under a cabinet, leaving a small trail of blood drop. He kicked it under a cabinet, leaving a small trail of drops of blood. Blood continued to flow from his forehead. His hands were stained red. He wiped his hands on his pants and looked around the room. He heard a car pull up to the back. The muffled voices grew louder, and steps were coming up the ramp. Barry looked around the room and to the coffin. He smiled. Barry opened the coffin and slid next to his brother. It's good to see you again, like old times, Barry said into Jim's ear. Barry pulled the coffin shut. We just have to hide here a little longer, Barry whispered. The door opened to the room, then another door. Stilted and muffled voices carried back and forth. The muted characters paced around. The vibrations from their footsteps carried up through the cart housing the coffin. The cart started moving, carrying the coffin outside. There, the coffin was lifted, then set down. Voices were heard back and forth, but the words were unintelligible. A few moments went by, then the coffin was lifted again. The vehicle took off, and the ride bumped along the road slowly. The old hearse's shocks had worn out over the years. Barry shifted around, getting more comfortable. He put his hands on his forehead to slow some of the blood loss. He burped loudly in the coffin, and the road noise stifled any reaction. The vehicle stopped. More voices sounded, and more voices gathered around. After a moment, and a few grunts, the coffin was lifted up and carried away. Barry smiled on the inside. The coffin was set down. Barry cracked his knuckles. After a few more moments and some heavy breathing, Barry shuffled and banged on the casket. Barry took a deep breath. He pushed open the casket and climbed out. He stared at everyone, and everyone stared right back. Right, that's chapter 2 of 52 from my dream. So as you can see, it's pretty in depth, right? You'd say, wow, that's really detailed. That's exactly how I saw it in my dream. I don't even call them dreams anymore, right? I call them visions or call them just experiences of consciousness. So I experienced that from consciousness. Well, where in consciousness? It's infinite reality, right? It's infinite quantum reality. Some people could say that's Akashic records. It could be other forms of record keeping. I was tapping into some sort of record, the non-local information field, tapping in there and just decided to watch this entire story of these different characters and people, take place. Maybe I was watching a movie. Maybe I wasn't watching a movie. Maybe it actually happened. I don't know, but that's exactly what I saw in that much detail. As wild as it is. Okay, so that's it from the Black Book. The last thing I want to talk about is about manifestation, the ego, free will. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about with will be sort of the ego. Right, the ego mind, right, is the mind of duality. The ego, this ego identity. I call myself Jacob. That ego identity doesn't exist in base reality in heaven and the eternal now. The ego is mind of the duality, the dual realm, right? So this ego mind, or the mind of the physical brain, not the mind of the soul, right? The mind of the physical brain, right? The ego is not consciousness, okay? The ego filters consciousness into what it wants. The ego receives the all eternal knowing from the universal consciousness, which includes your own consciousness, soul being your own consciousness, soul, in that being, and tries to figure things out on its own. Ego is the root of all our problems, really, in this realm of duality. If you take away the ego, you're not going to have any of the problems that you have now. You're not going to have any problem because you're not judging. You're not thinking about the past or the future. You're just existing here now. So whatever happens, even pain, whatever it is, it just washes through you. Right? And listen to your ego. This is something I think Alan Watts said this. Listen to your ego like the whistling of a kettle. Right? It's just noise. It's just something happening. Don't give it any power. They're just thoughts that come, and a thought you don't like comes into your head. Just notice that it came and let it go. Don't give it power by thinking about it and saying, oh, maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. Just let it wash over you like the whistling of a kettle. It's just noise. If you can remove the ego, remove that noise, the signal will appear, right? The signal and the noise are happening at the same time. It's not like you have to find the signal. The signal will be found if you simply remove the noise, right? You don't have to look for the signal. Just remove the noise and the signal's right there. It'll be found just by removing the ego. Remove the ego and you'll find the truth, right? You can't hide the truth, right? I forget, this is an old Chinese proverb. There are three things that cannot be hidden, right? The sun, the moon, there are three things that can't be hidden for very long. The sun, the moon, and the truth, right? Just remove the ego and the truth will be right there in front of you. The ego is the root of all of our problems in this reality. Ego came up with science to help it figure out how to figure out things faster and better. But all it did was help create more questions, not answers, right? So, right? Ego is created from the ego mind, because the ego mind is a lost thing. It doesn't know what to do. It wants power. It wants to figure it out. Right? You take rid of the ego. Thing is, the ego wants to try to solve something and figure it out. Well, what does it mean? What does it mean? It has to have a meaning. It has to. I need this. It has to have a purpose. It has to be this. It has to. Why? I don't get it. Right? All these things. That's what the ego thinks. Remove the ego. You're not going to be asking the question, well, what's my purpose? Or do I need this? Because you won't have a feeling of I need to do this or I have to do this or if I don't do this, something else is going to happen, right? Or well, why did I do that? Or you're not, all these questions, all that fear stuff, right? Is the ego. The ego is like it just loves that fear stuff. It really doesn't like the love stuff as much as you think, because if you go to pure love, you're not going to have the ego, right? So the ego is actually trying to say, stay more in the fear world, not go to the love world too much. Because if you do that, I'm going to lose all power. So, the ego, science, it's not like science is a bad thing, right? There's no such thing as good or bad. There's just different polarities of things, right? The duality. And so the ego is, it uses science to say, well, I'm going to create this thing called science and I'm going to try to figure things out because I have a lot of questions and I don't want to get the answers by using the power of love and being honest and having intimate dialogue with myself. Because if I get too honest with myself, then I'll realize that I don't need the ego, right? The ego will, if the ego doesn't want you to have an intimate dialogue with yourself, it doesn't want you to investigate yourself. It doesn't want you to have the inner dialogue, inner engineering with yourself. Because if you do, the ego will be rendered, useless, worthless, powerless. It won't have any power. The ego has no power once you realize what you really are, right? So the ego says, well, rather than doing inner engineering, why don't I do outer engineering? What is that? Science, right? Things that are outward based, not inward based, right? There is inward power and outward power. Ego wants to work with the outward energies, not inward energies, right? So it wants to know things, wants to know reality on the outside, not the inside. The ego likes the outside, not the inside. So ego says, I want science to help me figure it out. Uses outward approach to help me figure it out, not the inward approach. And so, right, science doesn't find answers, it finds questions. And we know that, right? Science is there to just probe. It probes things on the outside to see what's going on, right? Science is just splitting things and opening it up, dissecting things and looking inside. It's an outward process, right? Not inward. It just cracks things open out there and digs on the outside. It doesn't go in, doesn't revert in. It goes out, keeps digging outward, keeps digging on the outside, not the inside, right? It cracks open what it sees on the outside and sees what's inside of it and makes a decision, categorizes it, puts it into taxonomy, and right. It tries to label things, right? It tries to understand things on the outside, right? And so that's the outer engineering. So science doesn't find answers, it finds questions. Remove the ego and you will have the answers, right? So if ego finds questions, the soul, the inner you, finds answers because you remove the ego, the answers are right there. You'll find the answers because you are the answer. The soul of you is the answer, right? The ego is the identity. For me, it's called Jacob, that tries to take credit for what it receives from the knowing. The knowing is the all eternal, God, source, infinite base reality, whatever you want to call it, is, the ego tries to take credit. So, the ego sits right in this physical, is the mind of this physical realm, the identity of the being here, right? Not the true identity, but the pseudo fake mask identity. And it gets information from this, right? This base reality. It's like, if the ego is like general relativity, the macroscopic physical world, the decohered, basically decohered probability waves into particles, right? Like quantum waves. And then you have the macroscopic particles, general relativity particles, things bashing the physicality of things, right? When energy turns into matter, when the quantum turns into the physical, that is, the ego is this ego particle, right? The particle, this hard physical thing, is still comes, this finite thing comes from the infinite, right? The infinite quantum. This finite thing comes from the infinite, right? The infinite doesn't come from finite. Finite comes from infinite. And so, since the finite is sitting and comes from the infinite, it's still attached, right? It's still feeding it because it exists in the infinite. So therefore, the ego has channel access, like a conduit, to this huge, monstrous, infinite base reality, right? And a tiny little piece up top sitting in here is a little finite piece called you in this little world Earth, right? Everything else is just much bigger, right? Tiny finite piece that's hard, a little hard shelled piece, particle piece in this infinite wave, probabilistic, infinite base reality. And since it's still connected, it's still being fed. But the ego doesn't like to say, oh, well, yeah, I'm getting all this information, right? Called inspiration. getting all this information from this base reality, but I don't want to label it as what it really is, which is, the real me, the thing that's not me, right? Ego wants to remain alive, wants to remain, as a mask. And so it goes, no, why don't I just take the information, the inspired information that's happening, right, from this eternal now, and it goes up, and it's constantly bathed in this eternal now. So when it gets inspiration from this eternal now, from base reality, it goes, oh, I got something, and it goes, and the thing is, ego knows that it got something really powerful. It's inspired. It goes, ooh, I got something really good here. But it also knows that it didn't think of it itself. All amazing things in this reality, in this realm, occur to you, happen to you. All the amazing innovations, inventions, ideas, concepts come to us when we are not thinking, right? That means when the ego is shut down is when the true spirit information, reality comes through, and that's the true knowledge, right? And that's what comes through. The ego goes, ooh, what was that? That was really good. It's like, in a sense, inspired, right? I got it. But it usually likes to say, as soon as it gets it, it wants to say, no, you know what? That's mine. It's not from somewhere else. It was me. I thought of it. And really, it knows it didn't, but it wants to take credit for what the soul already knows, right? The ego tries to take credit for what it receives from the knowing. I think his name is James Weber. I forget his name. Something Weber. You can go on YouTube and type in Weber consciousness. Probably pop up. But this guy Weber shut down his ego mind completely, and it's been tested scientifically. They tested it out. He has like no ego now, and he well, also a lot of monks do too. They have no ego. I'm shutting mine down too. You should too. But this guy Weber shut down his ego, and what he describes it as the secretary on top of an elephant, right? This quantum world, right? This quantum infinite knowing where you get inspiration from. There's a secretary sitting on an elephant. So similar thing, like the physical realm sitting on top of the quantum realm, right? And you are the physical being sitting on top of this quantum thing, right? And all the information that you get is served up from the elephant. So the elephant represents the metaphor for this quantum, and there's a secretary that's riding on this big elephant, and the secretary gets information from the elephant and just writes it down, right? And goes, look what I wrote, and it claims it as its own information. Like, I'm the secretary, I'm smart, I wrote this. This is really good information. It doesn't want to say that, no, I just recorded it. I didn't think of it. It just came to me. I received it, and I wrote it down. Right? It wants to take credit. It wants to say that it actually thought of it when it didn't. It came from the elephant, and simply the secretary just wrote it down, right? But it thinks that writing it down means that it thought of it. Not the same thing, right? That's the ego. The secretary is sitting on top of an elephant, recording things from the elephant. So it's really, and so all of my writing, everything I'm sharing with you, it's not ego Jacob coming up with the stuff. No, not at all. I'm not taking credit for any of this stuff. All this stuff, I literally just observe this stuff in states of consciousness, right? I just observe it and I record it, and I ask questions, and then I ask a question. Well, out of the state and while in the state, I'll be in the state and I'll say, okay, what about this? What about that? And I'll ask honestly, well, why that? Is that true? Then if so, show me why it is or isn't. And I just record it. I didn't think of it, right? So, and I have no problem saying that it's not me, because, the ego me is not something you want. You don't want to be claiming credit for that stuff. You don't want to have attachment to the ego. It doesn't get you anywhere but trouble. Remove the ego and you'll find all the answers. You'll live a happier life, existence, and you'll have a much better time in this realm. Remove the ego from this realm and you'll be really happy, and also happy that you did so later on. When you die and you go to the other side, there you go. And if you didn't let go of that ego, you're gonna be like, man, if I just actually experience that realm, that physical realm with that dual realm without the ego, I probably would have been much better off, much easier, much happier time, right? Remove it. It's not helping you. So, anyways, guys, anything here for me, I ain't taking credit for it. It just comes to me from from the quantum reality, universe, God, source, the infinite, right? It just comes to me, and I just write it down. And I think it's really cool stuff. I mean, when I write it down and I read it, I go, "Wow, it's really interesting." Because it's like I say that because it's not like I wrote it. It's not like I thought of it. That's why I find it so fascinating. You know, if I thought it was fascinating, if I wrote it and thought it was fascinating, that's probably a very egotistical thing, right? Like, well, look how good I am, such a great writer, such great ideas. Not, I mean, this stuff just comes to me and I write it down. Like, just like you hearing it for the first time, I go, wow, that's wild. That's so interesting because I'm just recording this stuff. I'm just I'm just a messenger, and I just write these things down and share it. I think it's really cool. I'm very honored to be a messenger. It's so fun. You get to just share a bunch of this cool stuff. Right? So the ego, right? The identity, right? Right? The ego identity tries to take credit for what it receives from the knowing. The ego tries to figure out what the soul already knows. Think about your heartbeat, right? Think about your heart. If you think about your heartbeat, you'll get off rhythm, right? When I say think about it, it means use your ego, right? Think about it. Think about your heartbeat, you'll get off rhythm. That's the ego, right? Let reality do reality. Think about your heart. Think about anything else, like such as think about your own thought. You'll get trapped in your own thoughts. Think about how you walk. You start falling. You can't, right? Think about anything that is innate and natural and does it on its own, right? And you won't be able to do it, right? Um, uh, Basically, the ego thinks it's so smart. But if you're so smart, how are you beating your heart? How are you walking? How am I even talking right now? How am I doing all this stuff without actually knowing how I'm doing it? That's because you don't have to know how to do it, because the ego mind is asking that question. The ego says, well, how are you doing it, right? Existence doesn't ask, how is it existing? It just exists, right? It just does it because that's what it does. It doesn't have to know why. The ego needs to go, well, how are you doing it? How? Why? Existence doesn't require any reason. It just exists. It's what it is. Just experience it. Just let it flow through you. Surrender to existence, and you'll be free. And that's what you all want. Like, free your soul, free your existence. Just surrender to it all. Stop trying to control things. Surrender. And you'll be happy. Right? Let reality do reality. The ego has its place as a learning tool. So it's not like it's why is it here? It's here for us to learn. It's a learning tool. But everyone, because it's part of this physical realm, it's part of the construct. But everyone at some point really should realize that they just need to let go of the ego because it's just a tool and it's not you, and it doesn't serve you. It just throws you off path. It's a tool placed in this physical realm to experience and understand it. Then let it go. Okay, right. So remove the ego to get closer to source. If you remove the ego, it'll bring you closer to source and your true spirit self, and that's linked to negative beliefs about yourself. If you have a negative belief about yourself, that I'm not good enough, I can't do this, then that's gonna really just feed your ego, because if you remove the ego, the true you doesn't have any negative beliefs. It doesn't have any positive beliefs. Really, it just is. It just knows. The true you doesn't believe. It knows. It knows because it is what it is. It just knows itself. The ego has all these different beliefs because it's unsure, but it wants to believe. It wants to, I think this, I think that, because it's unsure. The true you absolutely knows because it's obvious. Right? And so remove all your negative beliefs. Remove all, like if this jacket was a negative belief, remove all the garments and your naked self will be the truth. That's your naked self, right? These are all these different things. All your coverings are all these different beliefs about what things are and what things aren't. Remove them all and you'll see the truth, right? Remove all the noise, you'll see the signal, right? So this is, positive and negative beliefs are are this. Remove all these beliefs, have a knowing. Um, right? You might have a belief such as that you're not feeling that you're good enough, right? And I've struggled with this belief, and I'm slowly removing it. You know, you might want to be better than others or have more than others. Maybe you feel that you're not enough, and this feeling is a hole that you try to fill. But you don't need to fill anything. You see, you are enough. You were born enough. You were born exactly how you planned it. Yes, I believe that. You planned this life, if you realize it or not, right? The higher self, the higher you planned this finite experience for your spiritual growth and evolution. All you have to do is really just be yourself. Surrender to who you are. Once you surrender, the self-aware ego will disappear, right? And you will be beautifully lost in just existing in this realm, doing what you were meant to do, whatever that is. It may be just simply trying to travel the world, collect rocks, swim, play sports, anything. You don't have to be anything you are not. Never compare your journey to another's. You don't need to be a movie star. You don't need to be something special. You are special. You were destined to be who you are, destined to be that unique one, unique soul, right? If you were destined to be a movie star, you will be one. But if you weren't, you weren't. How do you know? Just be yourself. Don't try to be something that just because you see it, right? If you see it and it resonates with you, that feels like it's your frequency, natural frequency, then that's probably a good thing. Go towards it, attract it, right? Whatever you are, be yourself, and be your own frequency, yourself, and that frequency will attract exactly what you need to do. And when you do it that way, you'll be in the now. You won't be thinking with the ego, right? Because when you are just in the now, the ego does not exist, right? When you're in the now, the ego does not exist. So be who you are, and you'll be in the now, and the ego will not exist. So just be who you authentically are, and in the now, surrender to that, and you will be free from the ego. And remember, everything is planned, and you are always going according to plan because your higher self and your guides are always helping you there, giving you hints. All right. Now let's talk about manifestation a little bit here. All right. Manifestation is always happening. Okay. What you believe, positive or negative, attracts itself. Like attracts like. Existence is simply energy and vibration. Whatever frequency you are aligned to or vibrating at is what you attract. You're being right now, and you're being right now in this realm. The soul fragment in you right now experiencing this physical reality is vibrating at a certain frequency. Okay. And that frequency is constantly in flux. It changes with every thought, action, word, and feeling you have. So whatever you are right now, right? Thought, action, word, feeling, and aligned to is what you are. That frequency is you, right? The frequency is what you are, what you're vibrating at. And you attract everything else in existence that is vibrating at that frequency in this realm or other realms, in this plane or others. That means people in physical reality and spirits in astral planes and others. If you are vibrating at a low frequency from constant negativity, um, you will attract people like yourself that also hate the world, right? So if you hate the world and that's what you vibrate at, you will find others who also hate the world. You're going to attract that frequency, right? Like attracts like. You will also attract lower vibrational negative spirits, right? Not just things in this physical realm, but things in the other realms, other planes, right? You will also attract lower vibrational negative spirits in the astral planes that will try to attach themselves to you. Yes, that happens. That can happen, right? Just how certain people in this room can attach themselves to you, so can others. So can spirits attach themselves to you in different planes, in different realms. This realm is physical, right? The other planes are not as physical or not physical at all, and so they, anything in existence can attach itself to you from any plane because everything is existing at the same point in time. There's no past, present, future. It's all happening at the same point in time in reality. It's only you only experience past, present, future in a finite way because of the ego and this physical duality experience, this realm. But in ultimate reality, it's all happening at the exact same time. So all planes are all together at the same time. That means vibrations are all just here. It's not like it's like, oh, the vibration has to go from a different realm and travel to you. No, it's all the same point. So all vibrations they're just going in on attracting to themselves at the same point, right? From all realms, right? And these negative spirits and astral planes, they will try to feed on your energy because energy is food. Okay, lower vibrations have it's crazy because in this physical realm we have two types of food. We have the physical food, right? Because of that physical particle reality, physical food. We also have spiritual food because we're also still in base reality. The finite is still in base reality. So we have right, and so we're also connected to the spiritual as well. So we have physical. We need physical food and spiritual food, right? We need both. Whew, that's a lot of food we have to get. But if you're in the astral place where there's no physicality, then it's just energy. Energy is your food, right? Energy is true food. Lower vibrations have low energy, right, and need to sustain themselves by stealing from others if they're unwilling to evolve on their own or to move up in vibration. Right? You can move up in vibration by a soul by learning what you're supposed to basically what you're supposed to learn. It could be like forgiveness, earnestness, love, humility, and so forth. Right? And this learning can be done on Earth, other planets, other realms, and this includes the astral and base reality, heaven, etc. Right? However, each learning center, remember, each learning center is not the same. You will evolve much faster on Earth and other difficult places than in heaven and other higher vibrational realms, because on Earth you are right. You're separate from source. Well, at least you think you're separate. You're never really separate, but you think you're separate from source. You feel like you're separate because of the ego. You feel like you're separate, right, from source. You're disconnected. You feel like you're disconnected from things. That's why you have this yearning to figure it out because you're so lost. Right? You feel completely disconnected here in this realm, a place where you have forgotten who you truly are, right? Spirit, a place this place is going to test yourself, test your soul. This place will really test your soul. If you knew who you truly are, would you really learn the same? Think about it. If you knew that we were all connected and how everything worked, would you make the same decisions? Right? Making a good soul, making a good soul evolving decision when you don't know anything about the greater plans is much more powerful than when you know more, right? So if you don't know anything and you make a good decision, it means more, right? Right? It's like taking a test blind is much more rewarding than taking a test with perfect vision, 20/20 vision, guides and guardrails, right? So that's something to keep in mind, right? We're taking this Earth, we take this test blind, right? In other places, maybe you don't take it as blind, but here it's very, very difficult. And others I've read recently, they say it's the most difficult. How much of it's the most difficult? But I do know it's very difficult from my own experiences, from my own communication, my own writings and stuff. I do know it's a very difficult place. One of the most difficult. I don't know if it's the most, but one of the most, because you're really blind here. You're so separated from what you really are. You're so lost, right? And the ego just gets you more lost. So it's very hard. It's very low vibration here, not the lowest, but very low. And also this also regarding manifestation. The secret, and I know the whole thing about this, the secret and manifesting. The secret got it partially right. You don't have to do anything special to manifest, right? As I've said before, we're always manifesting. Everything you do, you can't help but not manifest, because whatever you are, your frequency is what's manifesting, right? Who we are is what we manifest. If you want something, then you simply need to align to the frequency of that thing, whatever it is. This applies to anything from money and power to food and places, anything. However, right, it must be noted, you have to understand that although you have free will to manifest anything you wish, your higher self and guides may gently block or push you away from certain things, because really it would throw you way off your life path. Okay, so like me, for example, I was meant to share my journey of enlightenment with others, not to get rich. Right? I tried many times to manifest money and I failed countlessly. But whenever I would manifest what I'm supposed to be doing, things I'm supposed to be doing, it works like magic, right? This is because it's much easier to manifest who you naturally are and what you're supposed to do than what you're not. This isn't to say you can't manifest money and other things that you are not because you have free will. You can do it, right? If you are persistent enough, your higher self and guides will step aside and let you have that money, that power, whatever it is you wish, even if it's not for uh, your greatest good towards yourself and your goals. It'll let you do it because it knows that it's okay to go off path. It's okay to do the wrong thing because you'll come back and find yourself again and do the right thing, right? It knows that you're ultimately you have eternity to figure it out. It's not like it has to be done right now. It's okay. We'll figure it out in time. You don't have to do it. It's okay. It doesn't. It thinks it's probably better for you if you don't do it. But if you do it, it's okay. You have free will. You can do that, and it's not worried because we have eternity. You can just come back. You'll find yourself again, right? They will let you go off path so that you can get lost to find yourself, right? Get lost to find yourself, and they're okay with that because they know you'll find yourself again at some point, right? You'll find your true self, your true north at some point. So it's okay to take a detour. Your higher self and guides simply want to encourage a streamlined learning path, right? Rather than some unnecessary detour. However, right, you have free will to take any detours you wish if that's what you need to learn, right? And now going back to manifesting and attracting via frequency, right? If you want, for example, a maple bar donut, you need to change really all your thoughts, words, actions, feelings to maple bar donuts. Okay. You must become the donut. You must vibrate at the frequency of the donut to attract the donut. If you vibrate at the frequency of the donut, it will come to you because it has to, really, according to frequency. It has to. Like attracts like. Just make sure you don't set any particular expectation about outcome, such as like the brand or a specific look of it, or maybe a certain shop that sells it. Right? Just become the donut by thinking, acting, speaking, and feeling what it would be like to eat a maple bar donut. Do this and do this with all your being and sustain it. Hold on to it. Stay aligned with that frequency and it will come to you and you will go to it. The longer you sustain this frequency, the stronger you are sending a signal to the universe, to reality, that this is what you are. And the universe, God, reality, the hologram, matrix, whatever you want to call it, will serve you. Become what you desire and let it go. Once you fully experience what you want, once you become the donut, you will no longer need the donut. The donut will not be something separate from you. The donut will be you, and donuts will surround you, right? Because the frequency will surround you because you are that frequency. So all the frequencies will be with you. You're the frequency of a donut, and all the other donuts will be with you because you're all donuts. Don't expect any particular outcome, okay? Just become the vision of what you desire, and it will be so. Become the vision, the general vision of what you desire. Don't have any details about the vision. That's going to get you in trouble. Okay, that's the ego. The ego wants details about, oh, it has to be this, it has to be that. No, it doesn't. It doesn't have to be anything, right? The ego wants to be a particular thing for some ego reason. Okay, just you need a general vision. I maple bar donuts. That sounds great. Okay, now become it, and it'll come to you. Okay, the general vision of what you desire is what's important. Have the vision, and then don't fill it with details or hold on to it. Let it go, right? Once you fully feel that you are the donut, once you have felt what it's like to eat it, talk about it, taste it, so forth, you will have done it. You will have achieved the goal, right? Now sustain that feeling, sustain what it's like to eat it, and the separateness will disappear. You will not feel like the donut is far from you anymore, as you are, because you're constantly experiencing what it's like to taste it. And maple bar donuts will pop up all around you, right? And as they pop up, don't judge. Don't have any expectations of anything. Don't expect them to be free or cost a fortune. Just keep the frequency alive and let it evolve on its own, right? Let the universe control the outcome, not you, not the ego you. Let the universe control the outcome, right? The spirit you, the greater you, the all-connected egoless mind you, the spirit mind, not the ego mind. Let the universe, let the greater you control the outcome. For the universe, right, understands how to reach the goal and vision much faster than your ego mind does. Because remember, this is a quote that something that I say all the time is that right? There are no mistakes in a state of love, right? Okay, there are only shortcuts. I love saying this, and I even hesitate saying this is a quote of mine because that's the ego thing. Like, look at me, I have a quote. So I can see I'm always gauging and keeping my ego intact and saying, "Get out of here, ego." Well, this is something I see all the time, and I think and I'm not trying. And I see the ego said, "Try and be cool. Try to be wise. Try to take credit for something you created and make yourself look wise. You don't need to be wise." Yeah. Okay. Being wise is helpful in this dual realm. It is helpful, but you don't need to be wise. Just be. And part of me just being is I like to create these things that kind of compress things into really good little phrases. We call them wise phrases, but I just call them nice little phrases that kind of encapsulate all the things that come to me. But this is something I like to say, and it's really helpful. There are no mistakes in a state of love, only shortcuts, right? And when you are absorbed, right, by a frequency of any kind, when you are in the moment meditating on a frequency, you are in a state of love. Okay. And this is when the universe, your higher self and your guides, are channeling through you. You are letting go, right? You're surrendering to things greater than yourself to help you. The ego, you might want something extremely specific to happen right away, but the universe, the greater you, knows better. The universe knows that what may look like going backwards or sideways to you may look like going backwards or sideways is the shortcut to leaping ahead to the finish line. Let me repeat that, right? What may look like going backwards or sideways to you is the shortcut to leaping ahead to the finish line, right? Because sometimes you have to go backwards to get ahead, okay? Go backwards to get ahead. Sounds counterintuitive, but trust me, it works. Because the ego thinks it's backwards, and it's not a good way to go. The things you just go this linear way, when ultimate reality says linear, maybe, but maybe not. And usually it's not. It's usually this abstract way that more twisty and windy than you thought. It's like it goes in this portal, goes here, this portal, twisty, pop, here it is. And you think, well, that was really weird. But yeah, it was also really fast. And don't worry that it went backwards and sideways a billion times. It did it really fast. It's a shortcut, right? So there are no mistakes, right? Especially when you're in a state of love. There's no mistakes in general, because ultimately, if you get lost, make a mistake, you'll find your way, right? You get lost so that you can find your way again. So you'll always find your way at some point, because this is eternity. So you get lost to find yourself. That's fine. You can do that. Some people do, some people don't. But there's no mistakes. And there's especially, I feel like especially no mistakes in a state of love, right? When you get lost, it's a detour. When you're in a state of love, when you get lost, so in a state of fear and you get lost, it's a detour. When you're in a state of love, when you get lost, it's a shortcut. And so these shortcuts are, something that the universe will decide. And you'll be amazed when you just watch it do its thing. You go, wow, that's a wild shortcut. And it's always right. It's never wrong. Because it knows you better than you know yourself. Because it has all the information that you know and things you don't know. Right? It knows. So right now you go, well, how does it know more than me? I am me. Well, because do you know your life plan? Do you know exactly what that you wrote down yourself before you came in here and incarnated into this physical realm? No, but your higher self does, and your guides do. The guide knows everything you've experienced right now, all your feelings, all your thoughts, actually everything, and it knows what you wrote too, what your plan was before you came here. So it has access to things that you don't have access to right now. So it knows better than you, right? So surrender, right? So you have to go backwards. Sometimes you have to go backwards to get ahead. And the universe knows that. So surrender to whatever the universe offers while in this state, and be grateful, right? Be grateful. And having gratitude will sustain this feeling of love. That's something you keep in mind. And then I want to talk about a little more about vibration and these things a little bit, and then I'll talk about free will. It's kind of a long one today, but it's all good stuff, I hope. Okay, vibration, right? Right, thoughts, actions, words, feelings, and so forth, right, affect your vibration, right? Affect your frequency. What you think and so forth is a direct reflection of what consciousness is currently manifesting, and that state has a vibration. So when you are thinking of something positive, and then the vibration is positive, right? Same with negative. That your vibration is negative. It's in constant flux, right? Positive actions and thoughts, so forth, they raise your vibration, and negative actions lower your vibration, right? And notice how I'm saying here positive and negative, not good and bad. That's because there's no judging an ultimate base reality. Good and bad is subjective, cultural, and contextual. It depends on perspective, right? Such as eating bugs. It could be bad for some groups and good for others, right? But some things are more common than others, such as murder and so forth, right? Some things are more common among groups. These types of extreme crimes, like murder and so forth, right, cross cultural barriers because they disconnect, they exclude, they collapse, thus they lowering your vibration, right? Negative things lower vibration. I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying negative and positive. It's a different thing, and you have free will to choose negative or positive in this realm. Okay, and that's one of the things about this realm. You have negative and positive. It's dual. You don't have negative and positive in ultimate base reality. You just have positive. You just have the feeling of love, the positive thing. Why? Because love is all connecting and expanding. Negative things, right? They disconnect, exclude, collapse. Right, that lowers your vibration. Okay, if you kill, then you are disconnecting the love from the families and friends that you killed. Right, love connects, includes, and expands. This means that it raises your vibration by including and connecting more of reality into its vibrational field. You see that? Okay. When you're expanding yourself with love, love expands. When you're expanding yourself, you're connecting, you're including. When you include all the other frequencies around you, you become the donut. I become this mouse and keyboard. I become this coffee, right? I'm going to drink it and become part of this. The coffee's going to become part of me. Right? When I include and I expand in the state of love, when I include everything, you have to think about it. If you're scientifically minded, think about it this way. I am including, I'm not blocking, but I'm including the energies. I'm becoming the frequencies of all things around me. It's like Bruce Lee said, put water into a teapot, it becomes a teapot. Okay. What if I put water into every object of this room and I become the room? You see how I'm now the room? I'm larger than this being right here. I'm this being plus all energies in this room. It's a lot more energies than just this little being right here, right? I'm a lot. So as you're connecting, as you're becoming in the same frequency as all energies and all things around you, as you're connecting, what does your energy increase? Wouldn't it get more powerful, right? Wouldn't you be vibrating at a higher frequency? Yeah. So if you're becoming everything and you're including everything through the power of love, through love, the vibration of love, and you're becoming all the frequencies of everything around you, you're expanding, you're including everything around you, and you are raising in vibration because your energy is increasing, because your energy is, it's like one battery plus 10,000 other batteries. Yeah, I think it's a lot more power, right? But if you do the opposite, you think negatively, right? It's like you're chopping off parts of yourself. Okay, take off my arm. Well, there you go. Less energy. Another arm. Less energy. Take off my legs. Less energy. As a metaphor, right? You're disconnecting yourself and you're lowering your vibration. Am I saying good or bad? No, I'm just saying that's just what happens. It's a fact of reality. And you have free will in this reality to choose negative or positive. You don't really have that option when you're in heaven. Base reality, you just have positive and you're just all connected. But when you're here, you have the option of disconnecting yourself and having that experience. Well, why would we have it? Because reality wants to experience itself. That's why. It doesn't judge. It just wants to simply be, right? Existence simply wants to exist. Reality simply wants to expand and express itself and understand itself by being curious and just testing things out. It doesn't judge. So it also says, well, why not create a realm where you can experience what it's like not to be that, not to be love, but to be fear. Well, you can have that experience too. And while you're there, you have the free will to decide, do you want to be love or fear? Fear-based living or love-based living, or maybe a mix. It's up to you, right? Not good or bad. It's just a different expression, different experience. But also know that there are consequences. There are things that happen, right? Like if you think negatively, you're going to lower your vibration. If you do negative action, it's going to lower your vibration. Well, what things? How do you know what's negative and positive? Anything that negativity is anything that disconnects you and reduces your vibrational field. It's weakening you. Anything that disconnects, right, collapses and excludes. That's not good because you're removing energy sources. You're removing the energies. The opposite things that you connect, include, and expand, yeah, that means you're including more energy sources and you're getting a higher vibration. You're expanding. Yeah, it's a much better way to experience reality, to have more energy than less energy. We have, I'm not sure this is true or not because it hasn't come to me, but I've read, which kind of rings true to me, but I have no direct experience with it. But other spiritual people out there that I agree with, I think is highly possible. It makes sense according to my things I've written that you you can get so low in energy, your spirit, that you won't even be able to incarnate again because it takes energy to even incarnate into here in this realm, right? And some beings can't even incarnate into this realm because they don't have enough energy. They're so low in vibration they can't even incarnate, right? They they were so negative for so long that they've lost all their energies. And the thing is, you can't ever die because nothing ever dies, right? You can't destroy, right? Energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It just exists forever. Existence can never be destroyed. It just always exists. But you can have different perspectives on that experience, right? You can have a super super low vibrational frequency. That frequency is so low that negative frequency you're so low you can't even right, just like you can't even get out of bed. I'm so weak that I can't even get out of bed. Same thing. It's like, you're so weak you can't get out of bed, you can't go to work, you can't do anything. Same thing as your spirit. It's so weak it can't even incarnate. It can't even do anything. It can't do anything. Yeah. And they say, I believe that's true. And they say that also, some people, well, then how do you raise, if you're so weak, how do you raise, if you're so weak and you can't do anything, you're just dead. You're just stuck in this low vibration. You have no energy to do anything. You're just stuck forever. Scary, right? So what do you do? Well, that somebody some other soul has to give you energy, say out of its own compassion and love, say, I'm going to give you a piece of my energy. I'm pretty high up. Let me toss you a few bucks. It's like a bum on the street. Can't do anything. I can't even beg for money anymore. Then some nice rich person walks by and says, here's $100. And you're like, oh my God, you changed my world, right? You gave them energy. That's like, in this physical world, it's like money's like the transfer of physical energy, right? But in the spiritual world, it's spiritual food, right? Things like that. It's like you gave them, like in this world, you give them some money or some food, actual food like bread or something, and they're so grateful for it because they're like dying and they're stuck. They can't move. They can't do anything for themselves. But same thing in the spiritual world. You can get so low spiritually, your vibration is so low that others can hop in and give you a little bit of a little energy boost and say, here, I'm going to help you out. And one way is they can help you out. They say you can just give them energy, but one great way is that they say, I'm going to take away some part of your karmic debt, basically your energy debt, and say, I'm going to incarnate as somebody who's extremely disabled, who has extremely unfortunate circumstances, right? Out of love. They say, I'm so high vibration, I'm going to go through a very traumatic, really intense experience, a negative experience that's painful and it hurts. Because, and basically, as an incarnation, to pay some of your debt off. And then out of love and compassion for you, and say, you're so low, you can't do anything for yourself. I'm going to incarnate in this earth. And remember, earth is one of the hardest places. And I'm going to go and do it for you. I'm going to pay off the debt in this really extreme way. Pay off a chunk of all your debt, but a chunk of your debt, a large chunk of your debt, by having a really extremely difficult life on earth for you. And then when that soul dies, when that shell dies and the soul is released, is it, it paid off the debt, and that soul can be raised into a higher vibrational state. Maybe it's not extremely high, but now it has enough energy to incarnate on its own and get back on its feet. Basically, it's like the rich person says, I'm going to give you part of my wealth so that you can get back on your feet. And the rich person, let's say the rich person loses 10-20% of his wealth, right? But it got the poor person back on their feet just enough so that they could do things on their own. They have a little house, they have a little apartment, and they have some food, some money, some savings, just so that they can, do things on their own. Is it guaranteed that the poor person will become poor again? No. But out of the goodness of the rich person's heart, they wanted to at least give them a chance again to try again, enough just so they're back on their feet. That's a little detour here, but I wanted to kind of talk about that. It's important. Right? Negativity disconnects you and it reduces your vibrational field. It weakens you. Right? Ultimately, right? Okay. Reality wants to simultaneously learn about itself in any way possible, even at the cost of some parts of itself becoming lost. Right? But the goal remains the same, really, right? To stay positive and full of love, because it's healthier to stay connected than disconnected. Right? There's nothing wrong with negativity, right? Nothing wrong with it, right? Nothing bad, but it simply doesn't get you to where you want to go, right? It makes you immobile. Negativity limits possibilities, and positivity increases possibilities, right? Negativity limits possibilities. Positivity increases possibilities. Think about it that way. Okay. And the nature of consciousness, like I said before, is really truly to know itself, right? The infinite fractal reflection of the mirrors facing each other, right? This strange loop, the paradoxical loop, which was said in the book Gödel Escher Bach, which I never read fully. I've only read parts of it. Douglas F. Hofstadter or whatever, he said it's called a strange loop, right? And it's this paradoxical loop, right? Right. I know that I exist, right? But who is the I that asks the question, right? That's the soul, the higher you, right? In order for God to understand itself, it must increase the possibilities to do so. Negativity is a barrier to this objective. This goal isn't just something planned, right? The goal is built into consciousness itself. Consciousness itself, or God, by nature, wants to learn about itself in all possible ways. And in order to do this, it needs to be positive overall, even if some evil exists for learning purposes, right? The nature of consciousness or being is to become. The nature of being is to become. That's consciousness, right? Okay. Negativity is really a zero-sum game. And it's possibly a negative-sum game, but it's definitely a zero-sum game. Positivity is a positive non-zero-sum game. Positive-sum game or positive non-zero-sum game, or just a non-zero-sum game. Right? Reality is naturally inclined towards a positive zero-sum game. Reality wants itself to grow, to love, to experience, to expand, to integrate, and synergize. And it does this because it already knows what happens if you did the opposite. It knows it would be helpful to it. It knows it, if you do the opposite, it's not helpful to itself. It knows if negativity isn't helpful, positivity is helpful, right? Really, there is no time. So all potential futures have happened and are happening right now. And the same, and at the same time, it knows that what's best for itself and all infinite fragments that comprise it, right? The ultimate knows what's best for itself. It knows that it's best to be positive than negative, because being positive is how you sustain all the energies. If somehow there was, things shifted and all the positivity turned into negativity, you would not like reality. Existence would suck. Can you imagine if all of existence somehow was slowly going towards negativity, and then pretty soon existence comes to a halt where nothing can move, and existence is just this immobile, sad existence where nothing can incarnate. You can't experience anything because it's all disconnected. Ew, that's a pretty yucky existence, right? That's why existence knows that, and it already knows itself. It knows, if you go there, it's not going to be good. It says we better figure it out. And so it builds all these little things, these little realms and things that, hey, why don't we try to build realms to teach ourselves to not do that, right? So it's like before we do anything, because it's ultimate reality, base reality is pure love, and it goes, I don't think it's a good idea to have negativity, guys, but if you want to experience it, let's create a little realm that you can have negativity and positivity, but also I'm going to have rules. So like, you need to learn to realize that negativity isn't good, okay? So that once you pass the realm school, this physical realm school, that now right? Negativity is bad, right? Okay, now you can come back into the group again. Because if you just were in the group thinking, let's just try negativity. Oh, no. You need to have a testing area to show you why it's not good. And so, and last thing is, last little bit here. This is a long talk, but like hopefully it's all good stuff. Is a free will, right? Predeterminism or fate, and free will or destiny are two sides really of the same thing. Okay, it's more important to focus on using them in conjunction at the same time, right? Okay, don't think of them as being used separately. They're always used at the same time because everything is one, really, ultimately, right? All things can exist at the same. All paradoxes exist at the same time without any issue. Thing is, we call them paradoxes, but in ultimate reality, there's no such thing as a paradox. That's a very ego concept. Like, well, how can you conflict and also be this or that? How can you be yes or no at the same time? Well, why not? Right? Why not? There's no reason. The ego thinks it's impossible. Ego thinks impossible. Ultimate reality, based higher you says there's no such thing as impossible. I can create the illusion of impossible. That's called this physical dualistic realm. And you can create the illusion that it's impossible because that's the ego. Says I'll create the ego, which allows you to experience the so-called feeling of impossibility. But ultimately, there's no such thing as impossibility, right? The unconscious is where predeterminism comes from. Okay, the unconscious mind is the director orchestrating everything beforehand. It's your higher self and all other divine spirits involved in your plan. Right, your plan is your fate. Okay, however, your destiny is up to you. Right. The conscious mind is the fragment of you that lives in this life unaware of the higher self or past / I call it parallel lives, right? The conscious you is the ego you, right? The ego identity. The conscious mind is uh, um, free will within a greater plan, right? Free will within fate. The grand plan or fate usually has no specifics in mind. Those are largely up to you, right? Fate outlines your life with milestones and other general markers along your journey that you need to hit successfully. Um, um, they need to hit to successfully move according to plan, really. So to learn what you have, to learn what you plan for yourself to learn is what we're all about, what we're trying to do here. We're trying to figure out what we plan for ourselves instinctually through guidance of our own higher self and guides, right? Trying to realize the ego's not serving us. We have to look inside, not outside. And when you look inside, you'll find out what you're supposed to be doing. Whether those milestones are filled with pain or joy, it's really irrelevant because milestones are milestones really just regardless of the color of what they are. Milestones are just milestones, right? It's free will or the conscious mind that fills in the details, right? It's ego fills the details, right? And free will in conjunction with ego fills in details. If you could remove the ego, then it'll just be free will, inspired free will. And that's much better than ego free will. And fate lines up the colored buckets, right? And destiny fills them in with whatever works for it and in whatever way that works for however long it takes, right? All right, if you're throwing popcorn in the bucket for 5 minutes, for a day or for 20 years, right? It doesn't matter how long. Dumping old shoes in the bucket, one shoe every lifetime. There's no judgment, right? Right. You can go at any pace you want, right? Any rate you want. You have eternity to figure these things out. to figure and to achieve your milestones. So in your life, don't feel like you have to have everything done in this lifetime. You can, but you can also separate it out, right? Do one milestone. Maybe you had a grand plan for your life before you incarnated, and you're not able to do them all this time, or you don't think you can. Um, it's okay to just do one or two milestones, as long as you're really trying. That's what really matters. You have eternity to do it, right? There's really no judgment here, and there's no time limit. However, but right, the soul does enjoy when it stays in the now, right? And when you're in the now, the faster you go. Okay, the faster you move or plow through the milestones, the better, right? You make better decisions in the now, okay, because you're more authentic and you're in love and congruent with reality. You're aligned with all that ever is and ever will be. You are operating within the spark of divinity. Okay. Your divine self is revealed then, right? So you'll feel the buckets of your life, these big things you have to I say buckets of your life, meaning the milestones of your life plan. You will fill these buckets, accomplish these milestones with what makes the most sense in the way that's most natural and perfect timing. Okay. Whether that be 1 second or one lifetime. Okay. You know, okay. Now, what happens if the buckets are not filled in your lifetime? Like I said, right? What happens if your life plan is not completed in time? Then simply come back and continue where you left off. Just reincarnate again. It's up to you how filled your life will be, how many milestones you accomplish, how many buckets you fill. How many buckets do you want to fill? How many milestones will you reach in this incarnation? It's up to you. That's also free will. Maybe you complete 8 out of 10 milestones in this life and do the remaining 2 in the next life. You can split the work up. That's fine. It's really fine. You know that and I mean that's fine unless the plan you wanted that the plan that you wrote out required you to do all milestones in a row in one life. That can happen too, But I think ultimately, it's up to you, and nothing can be wrong. But even if your plan originally said get them all done in this life, if you didn't do it, your higher self says, well, at least we give it a shot, even if that was the plan, right? Um, so you can split or leave some for the next lifetime, right? Don't so just don't focus on how you can do less work, right? Don't focus on how to cheat yourself, right? It will, because that will just take you out of the now, right? That's your ego trying to cheat itself. Don't let your ego get involved. It'll take you out of the now, right? Just be your authentic self in the now and do what you're passionate about. Fill your life with your highest excitement and try to stay in that vibration as long as you can, if not permanently, right? It's the goal. Stay there. And in the end, if you have some things left over, that's fine. You can do that next round, next lifetime. You did your best, and really that's what matters, right? So the question really isn't, do we have free will? Really, no question needs to be made. Just live the answer of your true self. Be your authentic self in the now, and you will have the choice of how to live your life according to a plan, gently guided by your higher self and your guides behind the scenes, the universe behind the scenes. If you live this way, you will be in perfect alignment. You will be destiny with fate, conscious within unconscious, finite within infinite, free will within determinism. You will be a perfect living paradox within the eyes of this finite realm, and you'll be in perfect harmony in the eyes according to the ultimate base reality. It doesn't help to question how a paradox works. Remember that. It doesn't help to question how a paradox works, but it does help to experience it for yourself. So I hope that was a little bit of something you can munch on for free will and determinism, how they can both work together. What is seen as a paradox here is not seen as a paradox in base reality. And everything coexists just fine. All right, so I think that's it for today's stream. I hope everybody learn something or get something out of it, or just simply enjoy the experience or the stories or information. All right, guys, I love you all, and I'll see you next time.